I've wanted to intro an episode by saying this for years. It's time to duel! Welcome back to Motorsport 101. I've waited 6 years for this day. Finally, I can say that it makes sense. Welcome, Drugs. Welcome to episode 340 of Motorsport 101. I'm Dre Harrison, and I'm here for a podcast all about your favourite children's card game. No, wait, sorry. It's actually about Formula E's season opener in Diriyah. The new motorsport season as we know it on this show has started. Welcome to 2022, everybody. It was a fun time for all involved, sort of. We'll cover that with Formula E as we get going. But first, let's go around the horn. With me, as always, RJ O'Connell. Hello, sir.
I would like to take this opportunity to play Pot of Greed. This allows me to make two show intros that tie in Yu-Gi-Oh references. Wait, this is a Starbucks gift card.
Oh,
easy
curses.
mistake.
I keep my intro privileges. Beautiful, beautiful. We love to see it. And with me again is Iron King. Hello, sir.
Yeah, glad to be here. It is it's certainly been an off season. It feels like the motorsport never stops. The motorsport doesn't stop stopping.
Yeah, it never really, given that our last season didn't end until the literal middle of December, and then Christmas was straight away, and then we're back racing again with Formula E at the end of January. It's like, did we ever actually stop? Especially with all the social media discourse and all of that shit, it's like we never really stopped, but here we are. We'll soldier on as always, but as said, this is going to be about the Formula E doubleheader in Diriyah and a lot of the action involved. We'll talk about the new qualifying format. Now we've actually seen it in action, we'll give our full thoughts on that as well. We'll talk about a dangling Alex Sims car on a crane. Again, there is some context here, I promise. We'll be also talking about a little bit about the strength of the field and the entertainment factor of Formula E, which we're all sitting here thinking, hang on a minute, this was actually pretty calm? This is not like Formula E. What happened? So we'll try and break all of that down over the next few minutes or so. But places you can find us in the meantime, we're on youtube.com/Motorsport101. I just want to say a big shout out and thank you to everyone who watched our Rolex 24 trio of live streams and hangouts last week. Over 3,000 of you did that, so thank you. That was awesome. It was great. It was great fun, fantastic race, and if you watch part 3 in particular, we go ape shit over the finish. It was wonderful. So do check that out if you haven't already. We're on Facebook.com/Motorsport101. We're on Twitter Motorsport_101. Our website Motorsport101.com for all of our blogs, podcasts, and extra content as well on there, as well as our Instagram page at Motorsport101pod. You can follow us on there, and if you really like us, you can back us financially on Patreon. All the details over there, patreon.com/Motorsport101. So, with all that in mind, let's get cracking into the double at Diriyah.
My predictions were very bold. Some would say even too bold. But it's still a long season. Let's talk about this duel format. I think a lot was made about it, but now that we've seen it in action, what do you think?
Well, we certainly had peaks and valleys, like with any teething problems that come with a new format. There was some hilarity. We had Antonio Felix da Costa literally botching a duel by missing his pit exit. You just can't make this up. It was wonderful. And then da Costa seemed to blame everybody else except the fact he just missed looking at the pit exit light screen at the bottom of the road. That was quite funny. We did get a dramatic ending in the race 2 duel as well, the final, where we had Altara just beaten to the post by Nick DeFries by 5,000. That was pretty cool. But my general vibe that I got off the whole thing was, it's definitely better than what it was. Like, seeing it in real time I think it served its purpose. I mean, I can't. It's hard to say for sure because we're only one weekend in. We haven't really got a competitive grasp on the field just yet. It's a little early days, but it seems to me like it's done a decent job of putting the better cars at front, which I guess is what the series wanted. I guess. I mean, I'm not sure this is going to be the net positive overall that a lot of people might think it is, but I think it ironed out the biggest issue, which was the competitive balance of the series, at least. I mean, what did you make of it, King?
I'd say that, like, first, it's there. Any of the issues that people might have had with it kind of go out the window when you realize that, like, with the less talked about group stage before the duels, 12 minutes long with half the field out on track, you have ample opportunity to set a competitive lap time and have a chance to advance through, which is the biggest issue that people had with the prior format.
Yeah.
Once you get to the duels, there are some issues where the gap between duels are just really long, and it seems like the production crew don't know how to fill the space in between the duels. That causes issues. And there was one moment during the Friday qualifying session where during the final they trialed out something where it's like, we're going to delay the footage of the first car out on track to make it seem like they're both going around the track at the same time, and it immediately collapsed, and Jack Nichols had to explain, it's like, this is what we're trying to do to make it seem like they're side by side, but obviously with, each of the two cars not setting the same exact lap time, they're not going to be going around the track at the same time. And you trying to explain that, you're spending most of the lap trying to explain what's happening with the broadcast feed and not what's actually happening out on track. And they immediately scrapped it for the second round. I was happy to see that. But there some besides those small nagging issues, they seem to do exactly what they aimed at doing with this new format. Whether it produces what we want overall in terms of a product and how it might affect the other session, the race, that we'll get to that later.
Yeah. By and large,
what do you reckon?
I didn't have a chance to watch these live as they were happening, unfortunately, but I find it hard not to just agree with y'all that, ultimately, this new format did what people wanted, which is, I think, not punish the best teams with an unfavorable qualifying draw on a dirty track. I think that would have worked. I think that format that we had before, it worked when I guess the field wasn't so close, and then everybody got bunched up together last season, and then it became basically a lottery where you don't want Group 1. I think we can all agree this is better before, but I piggyback up Dre's comment that, if anything, the duels could be tightened up. Like, you actually went back and watched this, and you counted, I think it was 6 minutes in between qualifying duels on average.
Yeah, it was something in the region of 4 to 5 minutes. There was some that were as bad as 6 or 7, and that's a lot of dead space on a broadcast. And I don't envy, it's like the way that a lot of sports broadcasters earn their salts is what happens when you've got to time fill. That's never an easy situation for anyone, and it's like. It's never the easiest of watch when you're sitting there and the commentators themselves and the production crew don't quite know how to fill that time, and it did drag a little bit, and it's a shame because I think the duels themselves were decent, and I think actually watching them in real time, it was fine. It was perfectly serviceable. I just feel like the dead time in between rounds are, a bit too much. I mean, obviously in some cases it kind of has to happen, like from a semi-final 2 to the final, because you're running the same car back around again. Those are acceptable. That I can live with. But some like those in round sort of quarterfinals, for example, where like there was no good reason to have like a 5 or 6 minute delay between quarterfinals. I thought that was a bit rough, to say the least. Ooh. Whoop, my apologies. Looks like my internet had a bit of a spasm attack there for a second. Do you want me to go for my second answer from the top, just to make it a bit easier?
Yeah.
Yeah, probably for the best.
too.
Yeah, like I said, on average, I think it was about 4 to 5 minutes per qualifying gap in between duels themselves. Now, in some cases, that's understandable because sometimes, like for example, semi-final 2 to the final, the same car's running in both events, so there's going to be an end around that has to happen, which is completely understandable. But like, there should not be 6 minutes between a duel in the quarterfinal stage. That's a lot of dead space.
Yeah. At this point, you're better off just cutting a commercial. Like advertise some of the series partners or something. Don't make Jacques and Dario have to do awkward improv for 6 minutes.
Yeah, that's never ideal. Like sitting there just taking bobs at each other, like that. It's hard to fill time in those sorts of instances again and again in a qualifying session, and the whole broadcast on YouTube is an hour 45 for a qualifying session. I think that's a bit much. It is available on YouTube, which is certainly. Whoop, my phone's on silent there. But yeah, like I said, it's not ideal from a viewership standpoint and from an entertainment standpoint. I think there are some issues there, certainly. But I still certainly think it's better than what we had. Yeah. Right, so, next interesting scenario we had was at the end of race 2. The end of race 2, we had an incident with Alexander Sips. He had crashed at turn 5. He had put the car in the wall. Car was damaged to the point where it could no longer continue. There was a safety car deployed. It was pretty awkward in the sense of the drivers did not know there was going to be a recovery tractor in that part of the track. So the safety car had to bunch up, and then obviously everybody else had to concertina off the back of that. It wasn't ideal. We also had Sim's car being lifted quite close to the group of the safety cars passing around it. It was an interesting perspective to watch, but there was a lot of reaction on social media to it. I said, with that in mind, was this an avoidably dangerous handling of Sim's retirement? Because this did not go over well.
I cannot disagree with this premise. I think it was dangerous and unnecessary. I really think that we should have had a red flag to suspend this race. It would have given us time for Sim's car to be cleared off the track in a safe manner. Because, yeah, people were right to be worried to see Sim's car dangling at about eye level with the other cars that are circulating on track. Like, we had traffic jams. We had people bumping into one another when the traffic checked up. That's not good. I think, like, obviously, like, having that race end under a safety car, you know, it's an anticlimax, but it's whatever. I think I'm more bothered, and I know, I'm pretty sure y'all would agree with me that, like, yeah, this situation with Sim's car just being carried off by heavy machinery while we have cars circulating that close to it, that's the more pressing issue, I think, especially of our generation. The 2014 Japanese Grand Prix has kind of etched into our minds the dangers of cars circulating at speed while there's heavy equipment on track trying to extricate other cars. You shudder to think if Slim's car had somehow slipped off of the crane.
Well, I think the reaction was a bit exaggerated. And like RJ, you say yourself, the car was at eye level. No one drove under the car. It was impossible to drive under Sims's car.
I get you. I get you. And I'm interested.
And no one was going at racing speed trying to catch the safety car queue. Everyone was lined up behind the safety car. Like, from the standpoint I'm more annoyed by is, again, the race ending under the race ending behind the safety car. Well, technically no, because for some reason they decided, oh, we're going to go green for the last corner.
That doesn't really count. If you withdraw the safety car just as they're about to check the checker flag, that shouldn't count.
Yeah, like, that shouldn't have happened. The fact that they've done everything to try to keep the race going and circulating, that, to me, is the bigger issue. They should have just, like you said, had the red flag. Do I think it was overly dangerous? Probably no.
Like, I'm kind of in two minds on this one. I say that because, like, the TV camera angles were not flattering when this happened, and that's probably part of the problem here. And a lot of people just screen grabbed it, and they took that ball and they ran with it, which is not ideal at all. So, you know, it probably looked worse on TV than it actually was, which you know, is not exactly helpful as it is. Look, a tractor was inevitable on the track. The car was in a really awkward spot. It's a narrow track in the first place. You know, there's no getting around that. You know, it was always going to be a difficult situation. But it's like, has there been an overall directive in the FIA that, like, red flags are now, like, literally only pull out a red flag with no better option? Like, because it just seems like the sport's more reluctant to pull a red flag now for a race. Am I crazy for thinking this?
And the thing is, even if they did throw a red flag, the drivers would have to go around the tractor to get to pit lane. Like, there was never a situation where they wouldn't have to drive around it.
And yeah, like, I'm going to piggyback off King a little bit here in the sense of, yeah, like, I can't help but agree. Having them run behind that safety car for, I think it was the final roughly 8 minutes of that race, when they could have red flagged it, stopped the clock. You know, if you wanted to add a certain amount of time or whatever to make the cars still have to worry about their energy a little bit as they're coming over the line, so be it. But we could have still had a green flag finish here quite easily. The sport just chose not to. And that, you know, I felt was a missed opportunity. Well, no one really...
They didn't choose not to. Based on comments made by Scott Elkins to friend of the show, Hazel Southwell, after the race, was that that the recovery took longer than expected.
Right.
You know, I could make a point about how track workers, especially corner marshals, you know, they volunteered their time and their effort and their livelihood for this, and maybe they should be fairly compensated for their efforts and better trained as a result. But who's to say?
Yeah. Motorsport is not ready for those conversations on a large scale, unfortunately.
We're not ready for the conversations like, oh, we should pay people for their time and effort, and not just, oh, we're just gonna celebrate them for sacrificing their time and effort. Like, that's just compensation.
I know, and it sounds really stupid me saying that, but you know I'm right here. It's so stupid, but here we are. I mean, yeah, I get I know Scott Elkins was not in an easy situation here. Yes, I'm having sympathy for a race director. Suck on that, internet. But yeah, it was not an easy situation from day one.
And I know a lot of the drivers, like Jev, was obviously like greatly concerned about how things were unfolded. Robin Friends was greatly concerned about the way things unfolded as well. So from the driver's perspective, I think there was like, I don't know if it was just like, you know, that driving mindset of like constantly being worried that something would go wrong. But it's really fascinating. I do think for a lot of reasons it could have been handled a lot better. But, you know, here's hoping that it's the worst of it. We're past the worst of it, we hope.
We hope. I mean, yeah, the series needs all the help it can get in the land of internet approval, which amazingly it actually did get because it actually finished under a safety car. You know, No F1F reference here whatsoever. Honest, no, never. But yeah, not an ideal situation, but could have been handled better, could have been handled worse, etc. We'll call it a wash on that one. So we're now 2 races into the season. We've had a double header. Both slightly different. We had more attack mode in race 2, and we had Mercedes powertrain car split both wins. We had a 1-2 from the factory team in race 1, which was hilarious for anyone that was new to the series. Yes, motorsport is a funny old bag. You put 22 cars around the track, they go around in circles, and in the end, Mercedes wins, etc. And in race 2, we had Venturi come through with Edo Mortara after that late safety car. So now we have a little bit of a flavour of the state of play in the field. Did the actual strength of Mercedes surprise you? And if not, who did?
Oh, it's a situation where, without a doubt, Mercedes are the fastest team. Whether it'll carry over to the other circuits, we'll wait and see. But 2 races is a bit of a worry when they won both races and they also won poles for both of the races. I'd assume other teams to be closer to them. I was surprised that Techeetah, despite them doing fairly well in qualifying, just spent most of the race just slowly falling back.
Yeah, there's some mitigating circumstances here. They did fall back, and Merckx still operationally were a little bit clumsy. Stoffel Van Dorn made that mistake in race 1 where he missed his attack mode window, which is just, that was a silly error, but didn't cost the team anything because they still finished first and second. But as a driver, obviously that must have been a bit pissy. And then Nick De Vries just wasn't on it in race 2. I think they tried something different strategically with having the attack mode later on in the race for their second attack mode, and it just didn't work. I was a little bit surprised about Venturi, personally. I didn't think that, testing is always a weird thing to take too much stock into, but they tested Valencia. We're not racing at Valencia this year, and for obvious reasons, we all saw it last year. Valencia was not your conventional Formula E track, so it's always a little bit of a raised eyebrow when you look at testing with Formula E because that's not really representative. But I felt like Venturi was actually surprisingly good. I actually want to give a shout out to Oliver Askew as well. He ended up being pretty solid in that sense as well. RJ, I'm sure you can follow up on that.
I want to launch into that because the rookies had really tough races. We knew Antonio Giovinazzi was struggling in testing, but you don't think that a recent Formula One driver is going to struggle that much to finish in the 20s in both of his first 2 races. But with that said, and I know Oliver Askew has better equipment underneath him than does Giovinazzi or Dan Ticktum, but to go from 17th to 9th in race 1, very solid drive during race 1 for Askew.
I mean,
he's very new with this.
Regardless of equipment, that's impressive considering what Ticktum did in race 1, where he ended up going right into the side of a former champion in turn 1.
Felix Acosta. Yeah, I mean, we didn't even mention the argy-bargy between Oliver Rowland and Robin Frins. We have Formula Renault 3.5 champion-on-champion violence happening in the first race of the season, and Frins admitted, hey, I was sick of this dude racing me like this, so I basically turned him.
Damn. That's something you'd hear in NASCAR. I was just so frustrated that I was just done. I just turned.
I know it wasn't worded exactly like that, but Frins did basically admit to I wasn't giving him much space. Cam is not here, but I need to appeal on behalf of his Porsche Formula E team. They showed signs of looking like a better team, like a Porsche team that has actually earned their stripes, because Andre Lauderer, who last year would not hesitate to shove his car into a gap that wasn't there, showed a little more discretion. And Pascal Wehrlein, he looked a little more assertive when he needed to be. He was making on-track overtakes around cars at competitive speed. He was looking good. They didn't get the results they needed in the first race because of energy management issues, but in race 2, they looked much better, and I think that first win is coming if they just performed like that going forward. Those were the things that really impressed me.
Because it feels like, I know we talked about this in season preview, but it's actually showing up on track where Porsche look like they're actually improving.
It is fantastic. I was also kind of surprised that Nissan are still... Nissan didn't come away with any points. Yeah. They need to be better than
Real
this.
Sorry about that, fellas. My phone went off about 5 times there from one of my bosses calling me about that. I was like, alright, fine, let me just take the effing call. I always tell them I'm unavailable on Wednesday nights, but guess it was urgent. Where are we at? Sorry, because obviously I wasn't...
I've talked about how Oliver Askew did really well for rookie, and that Porsche are actually showing signs of improvement. And also, what the heck happened to Nissan EDAMs? I knew they were struggling in testing. I had no idea that they would just stay this bad.
It's like they're still recovering from the rule change that affected them badly last year. It's really peculiar that they just have not been able to...
It's like they're still recovering from Carlos Ghosn being shipped out of Japan in a box.
Carlos Ghosn do crime. Now, forever. It's very bizarre that they were absolutely nowhere all weekend. I'm glad you mentioned Askew as well, because that was one that was very impressive, and for his teammate Jake Dennis, because again I was not sure on where Avalanche would sit amongst the field post BMW, but it looks like Dennis's form of last year was no fluke. He was one of the few guys that was able to genuinely break away from those really tight jams and the traffic jams that we've seen in Diriyah before. And that sort of tight sort of racing that Formula E is known for, he was actually able to pass a lot of them and break off, which is a good sign. A good sign for where they're at going forward. And yeah, I can only echo King's sentiments as well. DSG Tito, I thought they'd be a bit better than that over the course of the year, just not seemingly getting it together in race trim. And Acosta apparently being taken out by Dan Ticktum in the back during one of those races, which is one of those drawbacks.
Yeah, we talked about that too. We also talked about how Friends and Roland got into it in the first race.
I love that, we had a bit of elbow rubbing from Friends and Roland, and then Friends went a whole he went for the bump and run as a response. And yeah, I'm glad. I know the stewards have talked this year about more aggressive penalties, and that was a clear bump and run, and he was given a drive-through penalty for it, which I think was absolutely the right call. Roland got a free-place grid drop for his role in that. I think they actually got that spot on, and I think they were pretty spot on over both races, to be honest. In general, I think they were pretty good. Gauging the line between this is just the nature of Formula E, because you're going to be more aggressive because of the way the cars are and the speeds are, and this is a clear penalty. So yeah, I'm overall, that's how I called it anyway. But speaking of entertainment value, I mean, now we've had a weekend of action as well. I mean, how entertained were you by the weekend as a whole, with everything considered?
I was generally entertained. I think this weekend passed the test for what people wanted more out of Formula E last year, which was a return to sanity. They wanted better driving standards, which, apart from those incidents in race 1, we got that. People that I know have said that they hesitate to watch Formula E or don't watch it because the drivers treat this like bumper cars. And from what I saw, everybody raced each other a lot more respectfully. I know, I hope that continues into the ongoing rounds. And this format, as we mentioned, rewarded the teams and drivers that executed their race weekends the best. I know it is early days, but one thing that I hope is that we haven't swung the pendulum too far away from the sort of unpredictability that Formula E is used to. And don't get me wrong, I don't think we want farces like Valencia and Puebla to happen on a regular basis, but I also hope that in making all these changes, that they haven't done too much to appease the people that never would have had a positive opinion about Formula E anyway. We'll see. We'll see. But if it does turn into a Mercedes Venturi duopoly all the way through the season, well, hey, you wanted this to be more of a meritocracy, and I guess you would get it then. Hope for the best.
King, what do you reckon?
Yeah, I'm sort of in the camp where it's like it's not terrible, but it's not great. And there are definitely flashes of like really great wheel to wheel action, like Degrassi versus De Vries up front, where it was real wheel to wheel chaos that we're used to, but it didn't get too aggressive, and it allowed an opportunity for Edo Mortara to get around both of them for the lead. And
yeah, that was great.
And I think that's what Formula E is about. And I don't want to end up in a situation where like the way that maybe qualifying's too fair and that it allows the field to be lined up in competitive order before we even start the race, so no one really has to drive through the field. And sure, energy management and attack mode activations do help shake things up, but you don't want to end up in a situation where it gets too processional.
Yeah, it's a little bit of swings and roundabouts. I'm in a similar camp to you, King, on this one. It's like I worried about the processions that are in there. Some of those cues that we got in both races where the action was just kind of in a stalemate situation. I know that a lot of that is energy saving and the tactics that come with that. But let's be honest. If you've watched Formula E for the long run, like a lot of us have, we've been bred on a healthy diet of chaos. Let's be honest with each other here. When we that's probably why we're still here, because we enjoy the degree of chaos that comes with this series. This was a very calm pair of races, relatively speaking, for what we expect for Formula E. Like, I had them as a solid 6 out of 10. They were solid races. They never tipped over into that sort of chaotic realm that we know the series for, but they were never really stale or boring either. We always had just enough action to keep you on tick over. It never reached that massive, like, euphoric ending that we got at Rolex, for example, but I don't know if I want an entire season of this.
No, I'd say a reason why I say, somewhat hold out hope, maybe it doesn't carry on for the rest of the season, that there were a lot of variables that made it somewhat processional, that outside of the norm, like this track being very dusty, a lot of sand offline, where it's like if you really wanted to go offline and try to get around someone, you were taking a big risk.
Yeah, and first 2 rounds of the year, you're probably not taking those sorts of gambles. You might do, say, if it was a season finale, for example, where a title might be on the line, which, hey, it might be down the road. We'll have to see. So yeah, I'm kind of with RJ on this one in the sense of I hope they've not gone too far the other way, because the risk is with this qualifying format, if you have made it fair and you have put the best cars at the front every race, you risk taking some of that entertainment away. It's like when RJ talked about Brazil's sprint race last year in Formula 1. Lewis Hamilton single-handedly made the case for reverse grids in F1, and we loved that shit. So, there isn't... one of my favourite Formula E races ever was, remember when we used to race with Sebastian Buemi when he was at the old Blue in Edams, and he went from the back to the front, and you can't say that wasn't entertaining.
That's when Edams were good.
Oh, the good old days when Bremy ran the field over. But that's what I fear might happen. But I hope I'm proven wrong. And obviously, again, it's still very early days. There are 14 races to go in this season. So hopefully we get a bit more variety. Because after all, it's the spice of life.
And we're going to figure this out in a couple weeks because the Mexico City E-Prix is on the 12th of February at the Little Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez. It's the same Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez, just a shorter layout,
Yes. Adios, Puebla.
Yes, the the baby version, and rest in peace, Pueblo. But yeah, hopefully that will be a bit more interesting in terms of variety when it came to Formula E. They'll be back in a couple of weeks' time for that. So yeah, that was us from Diriyah. That was a decent time for all involved, but it might have actually left us with more questions than answers, which is weird for Formula E, but also really not weird at the same time. There you go. A bit of profoundness from me before we get out of here.
Is there anything stronger in Formula E other than the fan boost clout of having recently been displaced from Formula One? Answers on a question. Answers on a postcard, please.
Well, no, because anytime we're about to leave F1, David Croft pretty much gives you an obituary.
He does. It's like we're going to list all of Antonio Giovinazzi's career achievements in F1 for Alfa Romeo during the Abu Dhabi race. You know, it's his 120th Grand Prix. He had that great 10th place that one time. You know, but what a lovely guy he is as well. You know, look at his hair. It's great. It's lovely.
I swear, if I ever run for political office, I'm gonna pretend that I'm retiring from F1 just so I need that David Croft eulogy bonus.
It's like as King's announcing his leaving speech, we've got David Croft just comes in from the background with a microphone and starts laying down King's career accomplishments.
That's probably an even stronger endorsement than one from Barack Obama at this point.
That's right. The David Croft eulogy. There we go. See, we ended on a positive note, so to play us out here, here's David Croft running down King's career accomplishments. Yeah, he used to write for Jalopnik. It was a great time. It was some great pieces about freeway crashes and Formula One endings, and he talked about that time Michael Massey was able to God mod a finish. You can listen to the full speech over on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/motorsport101. The bonus segment on facebook.com/motorsport101. If you want some extra endorsements from King, you can do so on his Twitter account at Ryan Eric King, alongside mine at Harrison101HD and at RJ O'Connell. We'll put the full written version on our website at motorsport101.com. We'll put the screenshot version, like Tom Brady's retirement speech yesterday. And it's 115 endorsements from around the sports world on our Instagram at Motorsport101 Portland. If you really, really liked it, we'll give you the X-rated version on Patreon at patreon.com/Motorsport101. I'm actually quite proud of that leaving speech because that's the most I think I've ever had King laugh on a podcast, and I've done over 300 of these. It's also RJ's 250th show, so shout out to Jason for pointing that out as well. So happy 250, RJ. Congrats, buddy. We love you here.
Is this the part where I start taking... Wait, are we doing the X-rated outro for this yet?
Yeah,
sure, why not?
Just hold it. Let me get David Croft. He's in a swimsuit.
Oh, yeah, baby. Okay. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you in a couple of weeks' time for Mexico. I'm Andre Harrison. Sayonara. Now, where's the baby oil?
Hey, King, I think now it's finally time to start counting out Touchdown Tom.
Finally.
I'm a New England fan, and I'm like, thank God for that.
Oh man, the reign of terror is over. Now the Jets can live.
Psych!
Oh my God.